Spelling with 3 L's is a Californian artist who I have been aware of for a few years now. Came across her style, her approach to arts pop music, and found it very interesting and very strange. Wasn't really a big fan of it, but I was at least interested to see as an artist where she'd go moving forward. And I am pleased to say that the Turning Wheel is actually a more dynamic and lively sound to what she was doing before, and I think she's actually stepping in a really strange and bizarre direction that's somehow at the same time very accessible, or much more accessible to what she was doing before. The opening track, Little Dear, really sets up the tone for the album straight away, giving off this mystical and magical environment that I think she just kind of builds upon with each track going on and on and on. And this one is really interesting. There aren't many artists that I can say remind me that remind me of a witch. She really does make me think I'm listening to a witch. You know that scene in Macbeth where the witches at the cauldron? It straight up sounds like she's one of those witches and she's just broke out into song in the middle of the play. Bizarre. I really like the arranged melodies that come through as well. Some really lovely strings that come up on this track and across this album. It's a really great way to kick off the album. Honestly, I think this is probably the best track just because of her vocal performance and how the sound of the song just gives off this really interesting, like, musical weird world that she's created. And I don't think many artists can really achieve this uniqueness right from the start. You get the intriguing, whimsical sound carrying on Turning Wheel, and then the piano lead that sounds like something Elton John would do. Honestly, once again, that weird witchcraft vibe comes through, but it's also, you know, used with this very magical, whimsical backdrop with the instrumental. It's her voice that adds that unique, weird tone because she has such a nasal approach to her singing, and again, she just sounds like a mystical creature from a faraway land. Awaken has these ominous chimes on the chorus, which I think are really effective. A very haunting track, one of the more passionate songs in terms of how emotional it feels in terms of her vocal delivery. It honestly at points reminds me of a Eurovision song, which I didn't think I'd expect to say for this album, because up until this point I never thought any track would give me that vibe, considering how, again, I've said many times, it's very witchcrafty and strange, and yet this track just does the complete opposite. I do think it works though. I think she's finding really interesting ways to carve out this niche for herself that I wouldn't usually expect from many other artists. Emperor with the Egg is another great moment that combines these weird elements of like a Disney soundtrack and, you know, Kate Bush weird vocals together over this Baroque pop instrumental that just really creates a really bizarre fantasy kind of sound that I think is once again just very unique to listen to and just sounds very quirky and strange. It's that fantasy element that I think sends this album in a direction that, again, wouldn't really come out of many art pop artists at the moment. They would usually take their sound in a different direction to what Spelling is doing. I like Boys at School for the way the instrumental progresses. It kind of like goes through different channels and different sections that I think is really cool. The main refrain of the track is quite interesting, where she's talking about boys at school never sticking to the rules, so she doesn't really like them. Let's show some respect for the boys at school. The boys at school. Give us some respect. It's this point in the album where I think the theme of some of these tracks is a bit abstract and odd that I can't really pinpoint at times. Considering how much of a witch she comes across as most of the time, maybe I don't want to know. Maybe if I read into the lyrics, I'll get taken under her spell, and we don't want that. Legacy has these really lavish strings that remind me of like Bachelorette by Björk, that kind of really like over the top, over like just over rich and expensive strings that just consume the song. I think this is a great moment for the album as well in terms of the instrumental. Like I say, this is a very dynamic album in how it sounds. I would love to you know, have a huge like stereo system and blast this one out just so I could hear all the different details coming through in different areas. I think this would make for a really cool listen in that kind of environment, but I just don't have that kind of thing. And as great as this album was for the first like 9-ish tracks, it really loses itself by the last few, I think. Queen of Wands has this weird 80s synth lead. It's trying to be quirky and off kilter, but it just kind of falls flat and just sounds like an homage to that era. Like this limp Eurythmics kind of instrumental that doesn't have any impact, and then the spacey intergalactic sounds that come in towards the end of the song are just so cheap. Really kills off the vibe for what the album set up, I think. I didn't really get why this album would go in this direction. I mean, so many tracks take you in weird directions that you're never quite expecting, so I guess it matches that. But in terms of the atmosphere that she conjures up with her vocals and the instrumentals up until this point, I think she was doing a much better job than she did on this one. Their Magic Act 2 just ignites nothing within me. What a dull track this one is. Not even anything to report in terms of a quirky delivery that she was delivering up until this point. It's just a very stiff track. The closing song picks things up again, though. It has a very abstract feeling to it that I think she was doing so well up until that point anyway. But yeah, overall a really good album that just tails off towards the end. I think she's really tapping into some interesting ideas here that I think is separating herself from many other contemporaries that are in the art pop world. It's a really cool idea that she's got going on here with a kind of musical fantasy, mystical, magical vibe that she's got going on, with also these really like expensive baroque pop, chamber pop instrumentals that just make this album really interesting and intriguing. I'm gonna go 7 out of 10. I think it is a really cool album. I think she's tapping into some great things here that I just can't really put my finger on, honestly. But hey, if she carries this on with future albums, I think she will start to garner a huge attention amongst the music nerds, because she's already starting to a little bit, but I think many people will be pointing to an album like this and going, yeah, this is something unique here. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would be interested to see what people think of this one. I think it could be quite a polarizing album overall, but let me know what you think. Have a good day. Subscribe if you have not already, and goodbye.